Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
All right, Films and Stuff, we are back. This is literally emergency episode. Pete, cue the siren. Cue the siren.
Oh my God, air horns, alarm bells, whatever you've got, this is
blow
an
the
emergency.
whistle. Blow the whistle. This is serious.
This is such an emergency that we haven't even introduced ourselves. Welcome to Films and Stuff. I'm Pete.
I'm Ethan.
We need to talk about the
Obi Wan
hopefully
Kenobi.
only season of Obi Wan Kenobi.
Before they do more damage.
I mean, Ethan and I talked about this very briefly last week. And we even said that we were going to do a recording next week at the end of the week, like we normally do. We normally record on Saturdays. And the idea was that, we'd discuss it lightheartedly. And then I would go into what I thought was like potential things that they should have done and what they shouldn't have done. We both saw episode 6, the finale. I saw it earlier this morning. I believe Ethan saw it just about an hour ago.
About 2 hours ago.
And I knew that things were hotting up when I started getting inundated by messages on Messenger, on Skype, and it got to a point where I couldn't type fast enough because I was literally frothing at the mouth. Like it was a serious speed disconnect between my typing and my thought processes.
Yeah, I mean, we're both kind of going off, and we were messaging each other, and we decided that we just needed to have an emergency episode, get all of this off of our chest, clear our minds, and hopefully it will be a little bit therapeutic. But I feel like at the end we're just going to become more frustrated because what Star Wars has done here with Obi Wan Kenobi is not just create kind of a bad season, but through 6 episodes, they're kind of rewriting A New Hope. And it's really dangerous territory.
It's such a bad taste in my mouth at the moment. Let's start, well, and this may be the shorter segment. Let's start with what we liked with season 1. Okay. I think it's fair to say Obi-Wan himself, Ewan McGregor, not bad. I liked his depiction as I did in the prequel trilogy. I think the one good thing this show did do was give you a very good transition of Obi-Wan after episode 3. So you see a broken Obi-Wan in Act 1 of this season. You see an Obi-Wan that's on a redemption arc in Act 2. And by that, I mean, he's getting reacclimated with the Force. He's kind of getting back into the idea of being a Jedi rather than someone who's running away from his past. And then Act 3 is, where he's kind of like, okay, I'm a Jedi and I have to do right by all these people who have made sacrifices for me. Let me start making the sacrifices. Let me take one for the team and let me kind of, rely on the Force as I once used to. So I think that arc was well done.
Ewan McGregor. I liked Ewan McGregor. I think he did a great job. I think they didn't have to make it so dramatic with Obi-Wan. I felt like the lows were a little bit too low, and I would have preferred a little bit more of a pragmatic and maybe a reflective Obi-Wan. I don't think they needed to diminish him so much and make it seem like he needed, deep psychotherapy to recover from this very traumatic event. And then, with the help of a young Princess Leia, he rediscovered his, Jedi-ness and started to embrace it again. I think they made it a little bit dramatic, but overall, I like the way that he played the character.
I will also say I liked that we get to explore Darth Vader in his full Force powers ability. I see you get to see a very, very strong and capable Darth Vader, which is we got a very good short 30-second glimpse of it at the end of Rogue One. But, what I think is important is that, remember, when we watched A New Hope Empire Strikes Back and The Return of the Jedi, 3 decades ago at this point, right? What was interesting was that in those movies, it was always alluded that Darth Vader is the most powerful Sith Lord in the universe. Obviously, Palpatine as well, but really, he's a man to be feared. Nobody knows who he is. He's this mysterious cloaked guy wearing a mask. We only heard about him being powerful. And then, of course, this is an element of also, this is the effects of those days. You only saw him really do the Force choke, and kind of that's it. And he wielded a sword, but, back then David Prowse was kind of a clunky actor. And again, through no fault of his own, that's just how cinema was done back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, right? Fine. So really it was at Rogue One where you get to see Darth Vader really murking everybody, right? He's kicking ass. He's using the Force. He is absolutely decimating, and you get to see that power, that hallway corridor power moment. And then you get to see a lot of that here as well when you're first introduced to him. And then you also see it in episode 5 where he takes on, he's using the Force to basically down a ship. He's fighting Reva, who's using a lightsaber, and he's physically just using his hands. He's not even using a lightsaber. That's how powerful he is. Yeah, it's maybe a little too much, but at the same time, I appreciate that only because it's a little nice to be able to see that. And on the flip side,
I think you're getting to the flip side, which is when you show someone so powerful, it really calls into question how that person is time and time again outmaneuvered and foiled.
Yeah,
right.
It's like, and to be honest, there are ways around that it was. You're right, because theoretically speaking, he could have cheesed any fight, right? What's stopping him from using the Force to as the second ship is going down after he's downed the decoy ship? What's stopping him from using the Force to take that ship down too, right?
Clumsy.
So they don't explain that, and I'm not saying that, I'm not saying there is an explanation, and I'm sure there's ways that you can justify that. But then, again, when it comes to Star Wars, when it comes to shows like Marvel, or, universes like Marvel, these are the kinds of things that people like Ethan, that people like Pete are going to harp on, which is, if you're going to have a literal god do this, you can't have him be fooled by such a simple display of a decoy. It's nonsensical.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
you could have had Reva come in at that last second as he's downing him, and he gets distracted, and he has to use the Force to not just take the ship down, but also keep her away, and that gives the second ship time to fly off. That's all it would take, is the simplest of explanations as to say, hey, look, this guy is all-powerful, but at the same time, he's got a ship in one hand, he's fighting off Reva with the other, he's only got 2 arms, right? There's only so much he can do. It wouldn't have taken much.
So are we going into our problems, or we're still staying on the positives? I think we said positive.
The last positive, I think is also just, we also get, like I said, I really like that we finally see the Alec Guinness of Obi-Wan finally kind of come out, who's this relatively joyful guy who, again, in the original New Hope, you don't see as an all-powerful guy, but you get to see him you got to see a young Obi-Wan be powerful in episodes 1, 2, and 3 in the prequel trilogy. But in this in this show itself, he was kind of like that feeble guy who was broken, and then you get to see him really kick ass, right? He's now holding back a ton of rocks on top of him, pushes them all away. He fights an almost full-powered Darth Vader, and he survives. And this, I think, is now, where we were typing back and forth furiously, and then finally we just decided, screw it, let's just have this quick emergency episode, right? And let's not talk about this plot.
Can I add one more thing that I like?
Yeah.
I actually liked Leia. I think that they really focused heavily on her, but I thought as an actress, she resembled what you would imagine a young Leia to look like physically. I thought her behavior modeled what you would expect a young Leia to be like.
Absolutely.
I thought that was, to be honest, a very, very good storyline, and I think it was very consistent with canon. I'd like the Leia element. I think the timing doesn't work in terms of she's only 10 years old here, and I'm really not sure what happens for the next 10 to 12 years and how she makes that transition to leading the rebels. But I liked her in this. I thought that she acted exactly how you'd imagine, and I thought that she had a very, very sincere and genuine relationship with Obi-Wan. You can see where that relationship, formed from. And I thought that at the end, it was a very emotional and heartwarming goodbye. I'm fine with all of that. Yeah. I still think the timeline, having at least 10 to 12 years before we see her again in Rogue One or A New Hope is kind of wrong. And I'm not sure how they fix that gap. But apart from that, I'm okay with Leia's inclusion.
I actually think, having seen this and seeing how good she is, what actually I thought might happen is we know the next major Star Wars property coming out is Andor, right? The Cassian Andor show, who we last saw in Rogue One before he dies at the end of Rogue One. Yeah. And it's supposed to be about the rebel movement and about that. What if we see like a teenage or, a younger or, not middle-aged, a teenage Leia there who's kind of leading the rebels behind the scenes, right? Because she's obviously working with the Rebel Alliance. Yep. And maybe that's where we get to see her next. Who knows? We don't know anything. But in general, I'm with you. I didn't like that it was the primary plot for 4 or 5 of the episodes in this series. And we'll go into what I think they could have done or should have done instead. But you're absolutely right. I think this young actor is played Carrie Fisher's role perfectly.
Yeah. Too bad Carrie Fisher's not alive to see it. I think she would have been
it's
really
a shame.
pleased with it, right?
It's a shame. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that's what we liked. But,
okay, here we go.
But I think we can start our dislikes exactly.
I'm sorry. I'm just cracking my knuckles and getting my
serious. You better start stretching because
boxing gloves on. Yeah.
It's going to get serious. I think where we left off after episode 5, you and I were both very disappointed. I was very disappointed. I think you were also, that the way that the ship with the rebels and Obi-Wan escaped was so kind of pathetic, to be honest, right? And we said, why couldn't Vader just pull the second ship down? I'm not sure how you hide a ship in a bigger ship. That's also kind of awkward. The whole thing
so I saw that again. It wasn't the ship in the ship. It was behind it. But then you don't see it earlier. I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. It looked messy.
It doesn't make sense. Like, was someone piloting the first ship? Did they get out and get into the second ship? There's too many logistical questions. It's just to get this optical illusion, like they're the Blue Angels flying in this perfect formation. In any case, we've moved on from that. But then my problem started immediately at the beginning of episode 6 now, where we see a Empire Star Destroyer, right? At the time, the most powerful ship in the galaxy, chasing this little, even from the inside, it's all rusty.
Like the equivalent of a semi-truck chasing a Volkswagen Beetle or like a Mini.
Yeah, it's a school bus. It's like you said, just a cargo lorry. And that Star Destroyer has maybe like one laser cannon and just shooting like pew, 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 missing.
I was
kind of rocking.
Flashbacks to episode 8. When they're getting chased by, and Laura Dern is leading the ship and Poe is leading the resistance. I was sweating because I was like, oh, this is like episode 8 all over again.
So I guess my problem with that is realistically, I should say that's my problem, is that this is not a very realistic fight. That Star Destroyer should have absolutely obliterated that. And then you and I had the next point, which is, if we remember New Hope, there was a tractor beam that pulled in the Millennium Falcon. What? There's no tractor beam for this? Tractor beam technology, what? It hasn't been invented yet? They decided not to engage it? Even Vader is standing on the bridge of the ship just saying, increase the firepower. Like, what is that? Increase the firepower. You don't have laser-guided missiles. You don't have anything that can shoot down this little thing?
And then on top of that, Obi-Wan's grand plan is, okay, I'm going to take an escape pod or ship and lure the Star Destroyer away, which, fine. On principle, that's okay. On paper, that's fine. But then we specifically see Vader also when he takes the Star Destroyer. He's like, no, you wait here. I'm going to go on my ship and chase him down. And you wait for me. I was like, wait, so why couldn't you have just sent the Star Destroyer behind this freighter going with with all these rebels while Vader pilots his own ship and chases after Obi-Wan?
Totally clumsy scene. And the Grand Inquisitor obviously is entirely tone deaf, where he says in the most, transparent language possible, well, we must go after the many. Just leave this one guy, right? Although that kind of echoes what the Emperor says at the end. He's very tone deaf to what Vader wants. It's really surprising after everything that he's...
But then he folds like a house of cards. See, like a cheap deck. Whatever the phrase is. He folds immediately when he says, no, we will go after. He's like, yes, Lord Vader. Okay, I feel like this guy who has been relatively cunning this entire season would have just been like, fine, you take the Star Destroyer, I'll take a second ship. It's not like there aren't more TIE fighters on here. I'll take a squadron of TIE fighters or one other ship that's in here, and I will continue chasing these rebels. You go after your quote-unquote grand prize. I'll go after what I know the Emperor definitely wants.
Yeah. It was super, super weak scene. Weak scene strategically and just, I guess, like the battle power of the Star Destroyer. If it can't knock down these two little, shit boxes.
It's shielded more or less down. It doesn't have hyperdrive. Like, what are you doing at this
Even
point?
if it has shields, come on. If you have a Star Destroyer, what's the point of being a Star Destroyer if you can't knock down this little cargo ship? It's not the Millennium Falcon that's outrunning it, outmaneuvering it, trying to run too close. It should have been game over.
Yeah, it should have been. And then now let's take a few steps forward and say, okay, let's talk about while Obi-Wan and Darth Vader are fighting, which, by the way, I must admit that, we didn't point it out earlier, much better choreography than we saw in the first fight scene.
Yeah.
Much better lighting. I love the lighting effects where you see the lightsabers.
The blue and the red.
The blue glow on Obi-Wan's face, the red. Yeah. Excellent. Really excellent use of lighting and cinematography. I thought that was well done. And, say what you will about the fight scenes. We'll get to that as well. But, simultaneously, Reva has now somehow duct taped her abdomen together and is in the span of hours has somehow
found a transport. We found her in the dirt. How has she found there was another ship on the Rebel base? Someone left something and she pulled herself together.
She got on a bus
as you
stop?
said.
I don't know.
Yeah, and she's gone all the way to Tatooine, daytime now, right?
Yeah.
And she's
she's being a detective. She's looking for that guy
in the marketplace. Yeah.
And
going through a proper due diligence investigation, right? At the exact same time that this freighter is still being chased by the Star Destroyer. This seems like weeks. If you would say this is months into the future, I would have believed it. Weeks into the future, possibly.
Can I give
days.
You an example? Can I give you a good example?
Yes,
in universe?
Please.
Remember, in the last season of Mandalorian, we actually see him take a public freighter when he's lost his ship.
I do remember that.
And he goes to Tatooine, and he has to check all his weapons.
Yes.
You see him take public transport.
Yes.
You saw him, and you saw that took time. It was what? A blink and you miss it. It couldn't have been more than, in total, a 1 minute, maybe 2 minute scene out of a 44-minute episode or a 1 hour long episode. That's all it took. But we were instantly on board to say, hey, this guy doesn't have a ship. He needs to get from where he was to Tatooine so that he can meet and, do whatever he needs to do.
No.
And that's all they did. That's all they needed to do. And they've already done it in the same universe. So what? They couldn't do the same thing for Reva to come up with some plausible reason?
For Reva, I really don't understand. Reva, again, she was in a rebel hideout, right? They already took their last 3 ships. The big one, that was the that was destroyed, the second one that got away, and then the third one, which is the escape pod. So they already took 3 ships. How many ships did the rebels just have sitting around? We didn't see any in that hangar.
Yeah.
So she must have commandeered another ship, as you said, put herself together, flew to Tatooine, got a cloak, started walking around and inquiring about Owen and his son at the exact same time that we still see
Obi-Wan
this
is leading this chase, this slow chase across the stars.
Does not make sense at all.
Fine, let's bend again, because we're Star Wars fanatics. Let us do the mental gymnastics to say, fine, she's managed to do that. And I'm with you. Remember, I'm with you. There's only so much we can justify. There's only so much mental gymnastics we can do before it starts getting too much. Right? And
for me, this was already too much.
So, I'm with you. you. But like for me, I think the straw that broke the camel's back for me was that you see this at the end or towards the end of that fight sequence between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, where Obi-Wan is trapped under the rubble, and he's got that cacophony of sounds of where he's being a failure, and he reacclimates himself with the Force because he starts focusing on the good things in his life, and like he sees the pictures of Luke, he envisions Luke, he envisions Leia, he sees a better future, and that's what it is to be a light side Jedi, and he's like, yeah, and then he kicks ass, everything's great, he starts kicking Vader's ass, but simultaneously we see that Reva has now made it to Owen and Beru's farmland.
Yep.
And she's now being, and for someone who was like a dark side, a Sith Lord, she can't handle a middle-aged man and woman who've got like these old school blaster rifles.
Like muskets.
Right? They look, exactly.
They were like Civil War muskets.
Exactly, right? And she's got she's got a lightsaber, but she's not able to effectively handle them. She doesn't use the Force to kind of knock them away. None of that. She's like physically brawling with these people. And say what you will.
I mean, she wanted to take on Darth Vader, by the way.
An episode ago, she was literally trying to knife Darth Vader in the back. And she's not able to take on this, middle-aged couple.
That have apparently no military training and have been hiding their guns for quite some time.
Right? And so she takes them on, doesn't use the Force, doesn't really lightsaber anyone. And again, simultaneously, Obi-Wan and Darth Vader are battling it out on this other unnamed planet. And then finally, Obi-Wan gets the best of Darth Vader. He senses something is wrong with Luke using the Force. Fine, I'm going to again suspend disbelief. One is a I mean, if both were acclimated with the Force,
it's a new power. Yeah. It's a new power, and it's never been tested in A New Hope. You've got to watch A New Hope and then work backwards because you can't introduce things now and not have them in A New Hope.
Or you can lay the seeds and say, we kind of saw this happen in, in episode 7, 8, 9, you can see that there's they call it the Force dyad or whatever, right? Where Rey is able to speak to Ben Solo and kind of commune with the Force. Fine. Drop the seeds. But that was that's 30 years from now. That's not 10 years from now. That's not.
It's actually 40 years. It's actually 40
right,
years.
40 years from now. Exactly. So you can't then introduce these powers and then forget about them in episodes 4, 5, and 6, only for them to reintroduce it in 7, 8, and 9. That's just nonsensical, right? But so he gets in touch with Luke. He understands that Luke is in danger, and then we don't know how he gets there in time, but he seems to get there just as Reva is chasing or finished chasing Luke through the deserts of Tatooine. Come on. The timeline makes no sense.
The timeline makes no sense, but even before we get to the timeline, why is Reva there? Is she trying to kidnap him and get back on Darth Vader's good side? No.
Man, that's the other
she says she's there for revenge. Revenge for what? The whole thing doesn't make any sense.
My God, you have that. I didn't even think of that. like like you pointed out, I didn't even think of that. Why is she there chasing after Luke? She just knows
she goes from a bad guy to a good guy, and now a bad guy again. Whose side is she on? What is she trying to achieve? There's no purpose to this trip.
So hard and so quickly with no real explanation, and she's chasing this guy. She's chasing Luke. But then she decides that she wants to save him. And she doesn't even,
she doesn't even know who Luke is or why Luke is. I mean, the whole thing, it just does not make any sense. What is her purpose for being there?
No one can sense the Force in Luke because he hasn't shown any Force-sensitive powers yet. So why is she after him?
Yeah.
And all we know...
It can't be revenge. There's no revenge.
Because she doesn't know anything. Right? Like, all she got was a broken communicator with Bail Organa mentioning something about Luke or about this child on Tatooine, and that's it. She doesn't know
because she's not mad. She's not angry at Obi-Wan. Is she? Like, does she feel like, oh, you know, I'm not actually a good guy. He manipulated me into being a good guy and to go after Vader? That can't be it. She's now trying to get back on Vader's good side. She doesn't even know Vader wants this dude or who this dude is. And then a kidnapping makes more sense. I mean, the whole thing is just aimless. It's just aimless.
Look, with the greatest of
But that's not even my biggest complaint.
What's your biggest complaint?
My biggest complaint is when we see A New Hope. I believe Luke said something to his uncle where he's kind of complaining, saying, hey... I mean, Luke's kind of a ninny in New Hope.
Totally.
And he kind of says something to his uncle like, hey, nothing ever exciting happens here. Like, if he would have been part of this plot in A New Hope, Luke would have been a totally different young man then.
Oh, yeah.
Hyper-vigilant, more respectful of his father and how he saved him, more like his personality would have totally changed. He would have been a much stronger, more self-aware, person. He was not. He was kind of a weak farmer.
Kind of like a complainer. Like, he's a bit whiny. He's like, oh, but I don't want to go to Tashi Station, whatever, to get the moisture converters or whatever. I can't. I have to watch it again. It's been too long. But you know what I mean? Like, he was whining about having to do work.
I agree.
And instead he wanted to go to like town and, have a good time, which fair enough. He's a teenager.
Shoot womp rats. Yeah. But I mean, it was just... So this, I feel like the biggest thing is it totally would have changed his personality as a young man and his appreciation for his uncle and his mom or his aunt. He would have been a much more vigilant person. I mean, this was a very, very dramatic thing for a 10-year-old to go through. And that seems to be entirely inconsistent with
it's almost like completely forgotten about. They're like, oh, we forgot about this. Let's try to like, why have the Luke chase sequence at all? This is not something that a kid is going to forget. And if you want to say that, Obi-Wan used the Force to kind of mind wipe him or suppress that, fine, show us that. Explain that, because you can't have that and then for us to literally see the next time we see Luke, he's like this whiny, bratty teenager in A New Hope, right? Like, there's no link. Yeah. There's absolutely no linkage there.
I think that whole storyline is just twisted and not at all well thought out. We don't know how Reva recovered. We don't know how she got there in that amount of time. We don't know why she's there, what her motivation is. Then she flip-flops and she kind of becomes good again, and she sees herself in Luke. She falls to the ground. She starts crying. She kind of wants forgiveness. Like, it's just too many changes in a short period of time, right? Are you good or are you bad? You can't want to kill someone and then 2 minutes later you see yourself in them and all's forgiven. It's too much. It's really, really too much.
Yeah, there's...
It's just disbelievable.
And these are not, we have a tendency to have minor, quibbles. And
this is not trivial. This is not
a trivial issue. These are fundamental, let's say, foundational issues to this show. And I harp a lot about this because there's no excuse to this, especially when we've seen The Mandalorian, and I know I keep coming back to it, but they have very, very, very carefully and successfully thought out how to integrate the two, how, or how to integrate the Mandalorian into the Star Wars universe that we know. How do we justify some things that we know are going to happen in episodes, because that Mandalorian takes place after episode 6, before episode 7. So we don't see any implications of things happening in episode 7, 8, 9. None of that, and it's very respectful of the lore because there's a lot of references to episodes 4, 5, and 6. And I just don't like that. And let's be clear, we're just two guys. We're just Ethan and Pete. We're fans of the series. And I guarantee you that you and I could sit down together if we had the entire script and the storyboard from episodes 1 through 6. We could have seen this coming a mile away, and we could have said, hey, look, guys, we may not be George Lucas, but I've watched A New Hope. None of this makes sense. How is this supposed to link?
I agree. Again, I think there should have been whatever the chief compliance officer or the chief...
what did we call it? The
consistent common sense.
The officer of common sense. That's right. Vice president of common sense. There has to be someone who's sitting there saying, wait a second, this doesn't seem believable, or this is going to be inconsistent, or I don't think people are going to be able to get their minds around this. Rethink this. There's no one who says this. I mean, that's supposed to be the job of the producer, of the director, of the writer. No one blew the whistle and said, hold on. There are so many checkpoints that they had to breeze through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just...
Let's talk about the Darth Vader fight scene with Obi-Wan, which is so powerful, but yet leaves a terrible, terrible taste in my mouth.
I don't know.
We just started by saying we liked about this that the full strength and power of Darth Vader is felt. Okay, point taken, if that's what they're trying to do. Yet he buries Obi-Wan, and I thought that was a great ending. That Obi-Wan is still alive, and Vader obviously is more powerful than him, and I thought that leads great to the fight scene that we're going to see in A New Hope, where Vader strikes him down and kills him.
Yeah, but we couldn't. You had to have Vader lose in this one, right? Because remember how how Vader opens that dialogue is, he points out the fact that, I am now stronger than you were ever were, and he makes I'm going to look it up. It's really that one final line he says.
Yeah, I probably have to remind myself of that as well, but I thought that the way that Vader was suddenly defeated by Obi-Wan was a little bit humiliating, and I'm not sure, maybe if there was no New Hope, I would have loved it. But the fact that there is a New Hope, the fact that Vader's face is exposed, the fact that Obi-Wan leaves him alive, it really calls into question.
So when Darth Vader meets Obi-Wan on the Star Destroyer at the end of episode 4 of A New Hope, Darth Vader says, "I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last. The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner, but now I am the master." Right? So you know that whatever battle you have here, Obi-Wan has to come out either victorious or it has to be a stalemate.
I was happier with the stalemate. I mean, I have to say, I liked that scene. I liked actually how it ended, except I feel like there's a very big... How does he not finish the job? I think you said it best. Can you explain the point that you made to me, which is that Anakin Skywalker is dead? Obi-Wan seems to have a moment of guilt
or
pity on Anakin, but Anakin is dead.
Obi-Wan we saw that Obi-Wan was broken, and we get the feeling that he's broken because he feels like he has failed not just Qui-Gon, but also Anakin Skywalker, right? And that he was his brother, he was supposed to train him, he was supposed to look out for him, and he feels that, that final battle that they have at the end of Episode 3 on Mustafar, he believed at that time that Obi-Wan had killed Anakin Skywalker. And that's why it was bittersweet to learn that Anakin Skywalker is still alive. And then we pointedly get that message from Darth Vader himself. And I say Darth Vader pointedly because he says, and this is, Obi-Wan has kind of sliced his helmet half off, and we get that beautiful visual, which is half of his helmet half of his face is Darth Vader.
The sound of his voice without the respirator, I thought was exceptional
because it was a mix of Darth Vader and a mix of
and James Earl Jones
and Hayden Christensen. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
And we specifically...
That should have been in a cinema. If that would have been in a cinema, it would have been...
People would have lost their mind. But if he specifically pointedly says, you didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I killed Anakin Skywalker long before Mustafar, right? Which is to say that Darth Vader, the dark side, had taken over Anakin, and Anakin Skywalker was no longer a thing anymore. So... and it was kind of like Obi-Wan being absolved of his past quote unquote, actions, because he said, you didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did, as in Darth Vader did. And if that's the case, and especially because the beginning of the fight, Obi-Wan pointedly says, I will do whatever I have to. And Obi-Wan has killed before. We've seen him fight to the death with other Sith or with other bad guys. Like, what is the difference? If Vader is now more or less on his death knell, he's the one who specifically said, I'm no longer Anakin Skywalker. There is no Anakin Skywalker. Why would Obi-Wan not finish the job? And I'm not saying that Obi-Wan is a mercenary and that he goes out, he's enjoying the kill, but that's like something he specifically said himself, I will do whatever I must.
I mean, not only why does he have the moral problem finishing the job, but just rationally, Darth Vader's already the worst person in the galaxy. If you leave him in this condition, he is going to become even angrier and more powerful and more vindictive and cause more harm and destruction. How do you possibly justify allowing this person to remain alive and to become more powerful and angry and vindictive? Yes. What do you think is the end game? Like, he's not coming back. You know that Anakin, the good guy, is not coming back. What do you think is going to happen if you leave him out there? It's terrible.
The simplest of fixes. Now that he's super connected to the Force again, and that he's guided by the light side of the Force, how hard would it have been in that moment as he's about to strike him down, where he sees, and it doesn't have to be Qui-Gon, although we do see Qui-Gon at the end of this episode, but he could have looked inside Darth Vader, and he could have seen an unscarred young Hayden Christensen, and he could have seen that inside him, right? And he could have said, oh, there's still a seed of good within him. In that way, I cannot in good consciousness kill him, right? All it would have taken, it wouldn't have taken more than 30 seconds, a minute tops. And then you can say, hey, I didn't kill him because that's still my friend in there, and I still believe against all hope that he's in there, which is, of course, what all Jedi do, right? All light side Jedis believe in the Force, believe in hope. Fine. That's all you could have done, but it's such a simple fix. It's not a complicated fix.
I agree with that fix. I don't think I would have been satisfied, but I agree with that fix. I was really expecting more of a stalemate where Vader is more powerful, but Obi-Wan is more cunning and has better grasp of his, emotions and better able to manage himself. And through some, not a trick, but he was basically more clever than Darth Vader. And it was basically a stalemate. Vader kind of feels like he won physically, but he was, outmaneuvered. So he's a little bit humiliated. Obi-Wan escapes, still a little bit of pride, but knowing that the tide has shifted. We saw that prior fight whenever they were on that other planet.
When they were training, right? As kids.
No. When they were training as kids. But remember, there was another fight before Obi-Wan was dragged through the fire.
Yeah, that's right.
Vader is far stronger than him.
Yeah.
And even that escape was pretty cheesy.
Dicey,
they had a droid kind of shoot. But
you raised another good point. So we saw that training montage at the end, at the beginning of episode 4, and you saw how Obi-Wan defeated a physically stronger, cunning, and more capable Force user.
Yes.
Why didn't we see that here?
I agree. Because here
that would have been the perfect mirro. Here it was Force against Force. It was power against power.
It should not have been like this. I liked it. I really did like it, but it's not consistent with the storyline.
Agreed. It's not consistent with the ideology that Darth Vader is this all-powerful Force user, and the only way to beat him is by beating him at his own game mentally. Is by beating him mentally. It's not by beating him with power because bronze versus bronze, you're going to lose. Pound for pound, you're going to lose.
Yeah, I know this is the wrong way to think about it, but I always can't help going through kind of the granular steps. Okay, so Vader is left there. His helmet is totally torn, right? He's got a big slash on his back of his cape. He gets back into his ship. He flies back to the destroyer. Someone's going to kind of see him, right? Like, it's not like he can just go to his chambers directly, maybe, and change his helmet, and no one sees the helmet. I mean, I'm walking through this in a very granular way. It seems like the most humiliating thing that can happen to a leader is to walk back and you've been absolutely destroyed, possibly near death in a fight. Suddenly you lose that mystique. And when we saw A New Hope, when we saw Return of the Jedi, when we saw Empire Strikes Back, that mystique was still intact. But if anyone sees him, and God bless he didn't have any stormtroopers with him on that planet, but if anyone sees him or notices, hey, look at his rubbish bin, there's a slashed helmet. What does he have, 8 helmets just sitting in his closet?
And you see slight cracks of that, I think, at the beginning of New Hope. Remember, an officer walks into his chambers and you see the helmet being lowered onto his face?
Yeah.
So that's the only time where he kind of displays any sense of humanity, right? So I don't know. Look, I think a stalemate, as you said, where Obi-Wan, overmatched physically, still has some cunning and was able to escape and score kind of a cheap point. Not a cheap point, but a point against Vader. And Vader's like, I know that I'm better than him, but he keeps beating me. I thought that would have been a good way to get to, this fight scene in A New Hope. And now Vader's like, look, this is it. No more tricks, no more games. I'm not going to be fooled. But and remember in that fight, Alec Guinness lets him strike him.
Yeah.
Right. He doesn't fight back. He just kind of accepts his fate at that point. Okay. So look, we have lots of quibbles, and those quibbles are quite serious.
Can I ask a question though? Of course. If we're going to look at Alec Guinness as so much older in A New Hope, Darth Vader's also dramatically older as well, right? So
yes,
when you talk about the powers, this would in theory be the height of Vader's powers, and they would start to diminish with age, or is it not going to work like that? So
now we're getting into, let's say, Star Wars lore.
Mm-hmm.
So between episodes 3, let's say, and then off screen 4 or 5, between episodes, let's say 3 and 5, when Darth Vader is, becomes Darth Vader, maybe between episodes, maybe 5, maybe 6, there used to be a lot of comics, and I'm sure there still are now that are now canon, where you really got to see that he was really at the peak performance. He was really kicking ass as a power user in the Force. I don't know if that's something that gets stronger with age, if that gets weaker with age, because remember, we still see Yoda. Yoda is still powerful enough to lift an X-Wing out of the muck in Dagobah, so he's no slouch when it comes to the Force either. I don't think there's an age.
But Alec Guinness is so weak. I know that Alec Guinness allows him, right? We're talking about Episode 4, New Hope.
Yeah.
In that scene between Vader and Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan is very elderly at that point, right? We identified he's like in his 60s.
Yeah.
Right? He's in his 60s. And even like his lightsaber, I mean, again, this is hard to go back to 1979, but his lightsaber was kind of intentionally a little bit diminished compared to Vader's, right? They were trying to like demonstrate that
I don't know.
He wasn't as strong. He let himself.
Was that the case?
I think so. The way that I remember it, and I think this has really required me to go back to A New Hope again, but I thought that the way that they even portrayed the lightsabers was that Alec Guinness's kind of candle was flickering a little bit. He was old. He was towards the end. That's not the way that we know Jedis to be now, but at the time it was, he's an old guy. Vader is younger and stronger. And yes, he let himself be killed, but Vader was absolutely winning that fight even before.
Maybe. I don't know. Look, I do remember that ultimately Darth Vader doesn't win that fight. Let's say not by a knockout. It's more like a technical knockout in the sense that Obi-Wan kind of lets him have it, right? And Obi-Wan he literally, if I remember correctly, puts his sword down and then lets Obi-Wan strike him. Yeah. And then you see him kind of sublimate from solid to gas and he disappears. And just a pile of rags, or not,
because Vader steps on his robes, right, to see if he's totally extinguished.
Right, and doesn't he say, when you strike me now, I'll become more powerful than I've ever been, or something like that, because he becomes one with the Force, or whatever that means, right? So I think it was more of a case where he doesn't actually. If you look at it that way, or if you think of it that way, Obi-Wan never really ever actually. Darth Vader never actually, quote unquote, wins against Obi-Wan because he kind of lets him have it at that point.
Yeah. But this one was just a humiliating loss.
And again, not in keeping with the theme, because that's also not something Obi-Wan would do. He wouldn't beat a man to within an inch of his life, which is effectively what he did with his lightsaber. He just wouldn't do that. I think he would have disarmed him. I think he would have pinned him down with the rocks, or pinned him down in such a way that he gets distracted, or something else would have happened in such a way that he leaves him with, for lack of a better word, with his dignity intact. And in this fight, he does not leave him with his dignity. Right. No. And you get to see that that's a little bit more like Obi-Wan is vicious in this fight, which is great. Again, it's great because you get to see wish fulfillment and power fulfillment. But does it really make sense as to the character we know? Probably not. That's not how he would have beaten him. And we've seen he would have lost. Like 9 times out of 10, he wouldn't be able to withstand that pummeling.
Yeah. The only thing that redeemed this a little bit was that when Vader speaks to the Emperor, the Emperor basically says, hey, stop being obsessed with this one guy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's good advice or not, but that at least to me is one way that we rehabilitated the fact that Vader is not totally obsessed with finding Obi-Wan all over again. I have to say, I don't know what else Vader is doing with his life for the next 10 years. It doesn't seem like this is a very, there's a lot of work to be done. But at least that conversation for me salvaged. Because otherwise, if I were Vader, I'd been like, everyone find him. Yeah? I'm going to just destroy everything in my way. I'm going to get him one way or another. The fact that he gets this instruction saying, hey, leave this one guy. Stop being obsessed with him. I'm not sure if that instruction would ever be given, but the fact that it was, at least for me, helps me understand why he's not obsessed for the next 10 years in finding Obi-Wan. He's got an instruction to let him alone.
Yeah.
I still don't think that's right, though. I'm not sure if the Emperor meddles into that day-to-day stuff. I'm not sure if Vader listens. Like the whole point is to find and kill Jedi, right?
You actually have come up with a great segue as to what we think would have been a better storyline.
Yeah.
So do you have any ideas? I have one, but I want to hear what you think that could have been changed or should have been changed in terms of the overall plot. Is there something that you wanted to see happen with this story, with the Obi-Wan story? When we first heard about it, all those years ago, that Ewan McGregor was coming back and Hayden Christensen was coming back, was there something that you would particularly have wanted to see?
I mean, I really liked the Leia angle to this, but okay. I wish she would have been older, because I still feel like this 10-year time gap is not sitting well with me from all the different perspectives we've seen. Now, where does Leia go for the next 10 years? Okay, she's going to be a young lady. She's going to grow up. She's still, got a big heart. She's still always fighting for good. Somehow she gets involved with the rebels, and I'm not sure how. It would have made more sense if she was 10 years older in this series, that group of people that she was on the ship with, right, when they escaped, that would have been her rebel
where she
group.
Starts sewing her, she starts getting her contacts and her network.
Like, that's a good segue, I think, into Rogue One. The issue with Luke, I think, is just irredeemable. I'm not sure why they did anything there.
Yeah.
I like the end, though, where you see Obi-Wan moving out of his little cave dwelling, and he goes kind of like on his alpaca into the desert. That seems to be more consistent with episode 4.
Where we pick up in episode 4, yeah.
Where he's kind of this desert nomad again. But the whole thing, I'm just feeling like they tried to stitch together 3 different storylines, a Vader storyline, a Luke storyline, and a Leia storyline. And I'm not sure that there are 3 storylines that you can stitch together consistently. I would have rather that they focused on one and at the expense of the other 2. Because Obi-Wan cannot be in 2 places at one time. And maybe that's the problem with the timeline. He cannot be protecting Luke. He cannot be saving Leia. Like, this is hyperspace or what?
Yeah,
he just cannot be. He's supposed to be in hiding, or he's not. So I just don't think that he can be in 2 places at one time. I would have preferred that they would have focused on one story or the other.
Yeah.
So I have to think about how I would have written this, but I think stitching together 3 was very, very ambitious, and now we've got all these discrepancies.
So can I give you what I think would have been a more interesting take on the... So let's assume everyone's cast. We don't have a choice. We can't get rid of people, okay? And I'm going to workshop the second half of this with you. The first half I think is strong, but the second half needs a little bit of work. We have the 3 main characters in this show: Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Reva.
Correct.
Okay, and Reva is kind of like used as a ping pong in between the good side and the bad side towards the end. And I think we can all agree her storyline was really kind of pants because of it. Here's my feeling of where they could have gone with the story. This is borrowing heavily, in fact, almost exclusively, from the video games that preceded this, from the, early 2000s. There was a game called The Force Unleashed, and it was about... The whole point of the Jedi or the Sith is that there's only ever 2, right? There's a master and an apprentice, and they always follow the rule of 2. And the Sith are also always power hungry, and they're always trying to backstab each other. And it's centuries even before the Luke and the Anakin Skywalker saga. That's always been a part of the lore, is that the master is always usurped, the power is always usurped by the apprentice, who becomes the new master, who loses it to the next apprentice, blah, blah, blah. It continues on and on. So here we have Palpatine, who's like the master Sith, right?
Yep.
What if you had a story where Anakin Skywalker recruits Reva to be his apprentice, and the idea is that the 2 of them are going to work together to backstab Palpatine, so that Darth Vader becomes the new Sith Lord, and she becomes the new Darth Vader apprentice. And so what he does is that he makes her go on these missions on his behalf as not just a test of loyalty, but also as kind of like a training mission. And so you see a little bit of that. There was The Force Unleashed, where Darth Vader secretly recruits an unbelievably powerful Force user called something Starkiller. I remember his name was Starkiller. And the point is that he wants Starkiller to become his apprentice so that the two of them can combine their forces to take down Palpatine so that Darth Vader can become the new Palpatine and Starkiller becomes the new Darth Vader.
Okay. Very similar to what Vader tries to do in Empire Strikes Back or New Hope, where he recruits Luke and says, come with me and together.
Yes. So that's what I'm saying is you get to see a lot of parallels with that. But in that case, right, you have what you're trying to do is you're trying to recruit. He was trying to recruit his son and a light side user.
Mm-hmm.
And Palpatine was encouraging that competition because Palpatine knew that whoever was more powerful of the two was going to become his new apprentice.
Yep.
Right? That was the whole point. That's why Palpatine encouraged that. Whereas so it was kind of sanctioned by Palpatine.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, it's no longer sanctioned by Palpatine because Palpatine doesn't even know about it. And so we don't have that issue where Reva is waffling between, what is her purpose and she's evil for the sake of being evil. You get a little bit of nuance because then we learned that she was a youngling, kind of like now, but it doesn't ring as hollow. And the end game is much more viable than what we see here, because here the end game is I'm going to get close to Darth Vader so I can stab him in the back, which is, again, as we've rightfully said before, nonsensical because she's done some horrendous stuff to get closer to him, right? So she can't be playing the good guy in disguise because there's a limit. So what I thought was, what if he knows who she is and he recruits her to become this super powerful dark force user, dark side user, who, he sends after Obi-Wan or after, Bail Organa or whoever. This is where we're going to start workshopping. And she's actually his real apprentice, not got anything to do with the Inquisitors. Because the Inquisitors, by the way, they didn't really do anything with the Inquisitors as well. It's just a nameless or, a faceless organization, really. You see a little bit of the Grand Inquisitor, but there's no real lore about the Inquisitor. We don't know anything about them, and the only reason I know about them is from the video games, nothing else. Or from Rebels and Clone Wars. So I thought that it would have been a more, let's say, plausible story, or let's say at least a less messy story, to say that Darth Vader recruits Reva, has her as his underling, and she's like an expendable, right? Because if they get found out, they'll throw her to the wolves. And if they don't, then he's going to make a power play with Palpatine with her.
It straightens out Reva's story arc, certainly. And that, anything that we could have made her a more consistent character is fine by me. And I think that she played a villain, as you would say. She was menacing. She was a very, very good villain. She was not a very sympathetic or believable good person.
Not at all. And very one-dimensional in any case. But still, at least in this case, she has a goal that's definable.
Yeah. So, I can see something where when she was a youngling and she saw Order 66 and she saw Anakin slaughtering everyone, she was like, she didn't feel, it wasn't revolting to her. She was like mesmerized by the power. She was seduced by the power of this one guy who could strike down everybody, right? And she wanted to like experience that power. You could show her, instead of being like scared and sad that all her, classmates die, instead she was seduced by the power. And you could see kind of like elements of the dark side in her even back then, right? She's like, wow, this guy's so powerful. He can kill everybody. I want to be like him.
He sees that immediately there, and he spares her as a youngling.
That makes a lot more sense.
And then he brings her up in secret as his adopted daughter.
Correct.
Not knowing that he has a real daughter. Yeah. And then it gets spicy because he's like, okay, your first mission, I want you to squash out the Organas who are kind of like leading the rebel alliance in the Senate. Go kill his family as a message.
Yes.
And that's how you integrate Obi-Wan as protecting Leia, and you move away from the Luke arc altogether.
It's a much stronger storyline, because even the storyline in terms of why they chose Leia to kidnap in order to draw out Obi-Wan is very, very strained, right?
It's iffy at best. Really iffy at best.
It's better, I agree, to go after the Organas as a beacon of or is symbolic of like kind of the rebel uprising, right? And say, yes, we're gonna send a message.
Even in the first episode, we see that, right? You see Bail Organa talking to his other politician friends, and they're like, the Empire is becoming a problem. We need to put them in check, blah, blah, blah. And then Darth Vader's like, oh yeah? Let me tell you what I think of that plan.
I agree.
And he sends his apprentice to go out and kill them all. And that's where Obi-Wan comes in.
Not only does Obi-Wan come in then, but it shows a little bit more about how Leia became kind of a rebel leader and obviously has a huge grudge against the Empire, right? I mean, now it's just because good versus evil, but if they would have
no personal stakes.
If they would have assassinated her adoptive father, I mean, of course that would have been sad, but it's not as though they killed her real father, but you could see like as a young woman, how she'd be like, you know what, that's it. You know, I don't want to take the throne anymore. I don't want to be a leader. I'm going to lead the rebels and I'm taking down the Empire. That's a cleaner arc.
And how impressive or how cool would it be where he's referring to Reva as his daughter? Darth Vader is, right? And in the same screen, you see Leia, who is his actual daughter.
Yeah.
Right. And he's sent out that kill order that you have to go and kill this guy's daughter or his family. And so we as audience members are excited by the fact that, oh my God, you know, you have his adopted daughter going after his real daughter. And it becomes, you know, it adds a little bit of, this is like that spicy element that you see in soap opera kind of things, which is, I'm not saying it's not important, but it adds a little bit of flavor.
But Pete, as impressed as I am by you and your mind for things like this, and it's one of the reasons that we love chatting and we've got this podcast, in Lucasfilms, in Disney, I don't know how many people are sitting in like the conference room or the breakout area, wherever it is where they're kind of talking about the storyboard and the plot lines. No one can come up with something better. I mean, yes, we're WoW. Okay. Full disclosure, we are WoW, but no one else is able to do this. We're not the only Star Wars passionate fans.
And we're certainly not even the most passionate.
And we're really not the best. We haven't read and watched everything. We've watched a good bit more than is acceptable given our lifestyles, right? But there should be someone else who's an encyclopedia of knowledge who's hired by Lucasfilms, and there should be 5 or 6 people in the room saying, okay, that doesn't work. How about this? Let's workshop this. Let's brainstorm this. Let's try this. How does that play out? No, let's go back. This is the best they came up with because we've been recording for 1 hour and 3 minutes. And just in a few minutes of back and forth, we've actually come up with a better start to this series, a better underlying plot than what we've had right now. And that's not acceptable to me.
It's
not acceptable to me.
I think that, especially in these big studios, it becomes an echo chamber, right? You have a bunch of these guys who I'm not saying aren't fans. I'm sure there are lots of dedicated fans within Lucasfilms and within Disney. But I think whatever their internal politics are, whatever their internal office dynamics are, I think I get the feeling that there's a lot of people who are kind of just like, let's start with a scene or with an image and build a story around that. And let's not worry about whether that story ends up making sense or not. You know, it's kind of like building around set pieces, which works for certain video games. Example, the Uncharted series, which is basically a video game franchise built around a series of set pieces. But it doesn't work for movies that have historically been very narrative driven, or for franchises that are narrative driven. And say what you will about Star Wars, it is a narrative driven franchise. It's not just about people swinging lightsabers around. It is a compelling story of a family that was at least initially thought out from start to end. And now I kind of just think they're floundering.
Yeah. What is it called? There's a word for this when you talked about the echo chamber. What is a word? There's usually like someone at a newspaper who takes like the opinions of the newspaper itself. There's like a word for that. It starts with a P maybe, right? There's like an internal monitor. They're like independent of the newspaper. Why isn't there something similar?
I don't know what that word is. Starting with a P?
I don't know. I'll think of it later. Why isn't there something similar at Lucasfilms where they're like, look, this person's independent.
Yeah, they need an independent board member is
right?
what they need. Right. And I think like if you have, this is true of typical corporate governance, right? When you have a board of directors, you have X number of people who directly represent the shareholders, X number of people who directly represent the managers, and you should have at least 1, 2, maybe more people who are independent board members who are not shareholders, who are not managers, who are there to just kind of give you a reality check, who are there to just be like, hey, let's be pragmatic about this. Are you sure you want to do this? It doesn't make sense given what you've already put out.
It's really frustrating. But the storyline that we just came up with about Organa, about Riva, it's much stronger to me. And then
it gives you a much stronger lead-in for Cassian Andor series. There's much better potential for linkage if you wanted to link.
And I think we need to leave Luke out of it, or you could have kind of left it without Riva ever coming. If you would have just shown Luke and Owen and how Owen really pushed Obi-Wan away, saying, don't give him a gift, don't have any contact with him. Now we've introduced him to Luke, right?
Yep.
Says, hey, Luke, nice to meet you. Here's a toy airplane. Like, it's wrong. That's such a sacred relationship or such a sacred character. It would have been better to leave Luke, not have any contact with him. And Owen was always his protector, right? To the extent that when we see Luke as a young man in A New Hope, that he's bored of the farm. He feels a little bit of resentment in terms of having to do yard work or farm work or get anything for the droids, right? He is in such a bubble. Owen has protected him so much that he's actually, created someone who's a little bit, bratty and
maybe even like a little bit backwards, right? Which is
right.
The space version of like a hillbilly or something like that.
But I mean, and that's exactly what we see, the space version of a hillbilly when he's introduced, to anything that's force related, right? And now we've seen him with this last episode with Riva coming and him being witness to a firefight and a potential kidnapping and running into the mountains where Riva drags him down and he's kind of knocked unconscious. And then she carries him back. And then he meets Ben Kenobi. Now this 10-year-old is no longer innocent. His entire mindset and his trajectory changes, I think, because of this incident. And that's not okay.
I will say it's very easy for, the two of us to sit and be Monday morning quarterbacks or Tuesday morning quarterbacks, as it were. So it's easier, of course, to criticize in hindsight. But I think it's also fair to do this critique only because we've seen them do it right on other shows. So why can't they do it right on this one? And there are very few shows that are, I would say, as quote unquote sacred as something like this.
Oh, I totally
If you don't
agree.
want to do it justice, that's fine. Make another Star Wars show wholly unrelated to the Skywalker saga. Let it go.
I mean, it's right. If you're going to take on something this important, you have to be ready for the fallout. It's the reason why it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise, is that there's a storyline, there's history, there's things that we take very seriously, And if you're going to start to fudge with that a little bit, you can't be surprised or unhappy if there's going to be some blowback. But all of this is self-inflicted as well. We're not saying we don't like the story. That's not really the issue. It's the fact that the story is impacting the story that's already been told. That you can't have revisionist history. You've got a blank slate to do whatever you want. You could have shown Leia in any light that you wanted, but at least make it consistent with what you have. And I thought they did a great job with Leia. I thought her mannerisms, I thought her hair with the braids, like they presented something that's very, very consistent with the character that we meet.
Her attitude, everything. Yes. That was definitely a mini Carrie Fisher.
And that's what we want, right? And the same thing with Obi Wan. We've seen him carry over a little bit. It's the introduction of the new people and the way that we've seen this fight scene with Vader, which I think is really damaging and doesn't make any sense. Those are the problems that I have. And it's going to be, I don't know. It's the more they do, the more danger they have of undoing what we've come to love and rely on so much.
Yeah, because in this case, what you're doing is you're watering down a franchise that doesn't need it to be watered down. And the more you do, the less likely we are to want to go back to that. And, the reason I'm concerned is because there were rumors a couple of weeks ago that Disney was interested in making a Reva-centric show.
Yeah.
And of all the characters they could choose to do, Reva is the least interesting for me based on this. And again, this has nothing to do with the actor. This is 100% the writer's fault. She's very good. She is menacing.
Bad guy. She's a great bad guy. But
she was just written so flat and so boring that way. I don't want to see another 6, 8, 12 episodes of her yelling and fighting guys and being cruel and vindictive. It makes no sense. There's no value add for me.
I don't know what else to say. I mean, but I think also to have a good character, that character doesn't need to have a well-rounded story. We don't need to see everything about Reva. I just need consistency. I just need her to act a certain way. I don't need to know every reason why she's acting that way. Let her be a bad guy always. I don't think that she needed to flip on Vader. And if she flipped on Vader, then I'm not sure where her motivation is or where her loyalty is.
Yeah, it needs to be plausible. Whenever you do anything that dramatic or that, seismic in terms of character motivation, it needs to be plausible. And it wasn't plausible. It really wasn't plausible. I really like the idea that if Vader had seen her as a youngling, as if Anakin had seen her as a youngling and sensed a darkness within her or a potential for darkness within her, and then keeps her alive and, spares her from that Order 66 so that he can train her to be his apprentice, or forget apprentice. That's the start of the Inquisitors.
Yeah.
That is far more compelling to me as a character backstory. Not someone who was a part of Order 66. She saw the people get killed. She has this burning hate for Darth Vader. She has a burning hate for Obi-Wan. She's in the middle of nowhere. She's caught in between a rock and a hard place.
What do you think is going to happen? Is there going to be another season?
I don't think so. I for two reasons. One, they've kind of written off the Leia storyline now.
Yeah.
Right? And the Leia storyline, if they really want to pick up the Leia storyline, that's going to come in Andor.
Yeah. I
see that as, now a slightly older Leia, a teenage Leia who's kind of working with the rebels. Maybe Jimmy Smits is okay with it. Maybe he's not okay with it. But I see a little bit of that. What else is left? The only other canon story that I can think of is Darth Maul versus Obi-Wan. And we've seen that storyline in Rebels and I think Clone Wars in the animated shows. So Darth Maul is still alive in the Star Wars universe. Obi-Wan is not aware of it at this point. Mm-hmm. I think Yep, no. In fact, that timeline doesn't even match up there. So it has to be, like, theoretically speaking, what happens is we see in the Rebel storyline that Darth Maul finds out that there is a man there, that he's hunting Obi-Wan as well, but that, similar to what Darth Vader was, finds him on Tatooine, and then he puts two and two together. Why would the most powerful Jedi or the most famous Jedi be on this backwater planet? He's in hiding. Why are you here? Oh, you're here to protect someone. He figures it. He uses the Force to mind probe Obi-Wan and figures out that he's here protecting Darth Vader's child, and he believes that. And then Obi-Wan has to battle.
That's a lot of mind probing. That's a lot of mind probing.
No, I mean he puts it together. He doesn't mind probe like that, but he puts it together. And it's actually, when you see it on the show, they do it very tastefully. They do it very tastefully, and it's very believable. That's the only thing I can see them doing is, but then it's a repeat of that story.
Whatever happened? Why don't they do a show on Cloud City? Make it Lando based.
So theoretically there was supposed to be a Lando Calrissian storyline or series.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to that, because remember that after the Solo movie was kind of panned, a lot of changes were made in Lucasfilms. And I think, like, Kathleen Kennedy was facing a lot of shareholder pressure and investor pressure and critical pressure, especially after, like, episodes 7, 8, 9, basically, or maybe not 7, but at least 8 and definitely 9 were like.
I think a Lando series would be very well received, because this also takes us a little bit away from lore. It still gives us a character who's beloved, and
recognizable character. Yeah.
And it's very hard, as we've seen from Solo. It's very hard just to talk about a character in a 2-hour movie. You can talk about an event, but hard to talk about a character in a 2-hour movie. Instead, it could just be Cloud City and just make it very dramatic. Make it a really dramatic series. There's got to be lots of smuggling, love triangles, good guys, bad guys. It can be like a
Goodfellas version, right? Like the mob. You have basically Goodfellas with Lando as, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and Ray Liotta.
I mean, he's kind of he walks this balance where he's kind of a good guy. He lays down the law. He's a little bit dodgy. He's into some gray stuff. He's got to make the Empire happy, but he's also a friend of the rebels. He's always like triangulating, playing all sides. I think that would have been great. You could have even, if you wanted to, had like a cameo by Solo. If you really wanted to.
Or even Darth Vader.
Yeah. I think honestly, if that was a 12-episode season 1, season 2, season 3, I could get really into that. We love, For All Mankind. We love so many different series. That could be a very, very dramatic series that has
a gangster series?
Yeah, that has a lot of carryover, and you're not really doing any damage. There's no real damage to the franchise. It's got the brand equity that it's Lucasfilms, it's Lando, it's Cloud City. But it's got
nothing to do with the Skywalkers. Yeah. It's got nothing to do. You see the Empire, you see the Rebels, but they're kind of just ancillary characters.
There's kind of from time to time a stormtrooper, walking around, but overall it's just its own dramatic series. Like you said, kind of a mob, outpost.
Yeah, or, I don't know if it's a mob outpost, but yes, whatever it is, right? It's clearly like an underworld city of some kind, right?
There's
definitely shady deals happening on there. It's kind of like that casino planet, but it doesn't need to be a casino planet.
I agree.
Right? It could be an underworld parlor games.
Boba Fett could walk by once, right? He could come in for a drink and refuel. You could see some of the well-known spacecraft.
We see Bosk. We see other mercenaries that we didn't see in any of them, right? You see IG-88. We see all these guys in there. Absolutely.
For me, this is very low-hanging fruit, because you don't even need a Star Wars, someone who knows the canon to write it. You need someone who knows Lando a little bit. And the rest of it is like, hey, who's done a dramatic series, come in and give me like dramatic storylines and plot twists and new characters.
And say what you will, Donald Glover did a great job as Lando in the Solo movie.
Great job.
He was
amazing.
Really convincing.
Very, very good.
Maybe, yeah. And, you know, again, if you're desperate for having a connection to the Star Wars universe, make an episode about how he wins the Millennium Falcon, or, you know what I mean? It's like something like that.
Did we not see that at the end of Solo?
No, you see him lose the Millennium Falcon to Han Solo, but we never really figure out how he gets the Millennium Falcon.
Yes.
You know, again, these are throwaway episodes that are
low-hanging fruit for a multi-billion-dollar franchise. If they would do 12 episodes of Cloud, just call it Cloud City, we would be in.
Oh, man, yeah.
Immediately in.
Do a Breaking Bad of Star Wars. Do a Mad Men of Star Wars. Do something like that of Star Wars. You know, it's. You're right. It's low hanging, especially because you're not going to damage the franchise. Yeah. If you make a controversial decision or do something that's seen as controversial, it's controversial to Lando. It's not controversial to Luke. Yeah. To Obi-Wan, to Darth Vader, to any of the New Hope or any of the episodes.
And I feel like that's how you build up the franchise. If you want, I mean, we're limited what we can do with the films now just because the absence of characters and the absence of like real conflict. So the only way to build it out is to create something new.
Well, yeah. And so I don't know if I told you this in the last week's episodes or if we talked about this offline. So Taika Waititi is making a Star Wars movie.
Huh.
And, you know, we saw him. He voiced that robot in The Mandalorian, you know, the nursing robot and the assassin droid. Yeah. So the reason he's in those movies is because he's right now writing and producing, or maybe, I don't know if they're filming or if they've even come up with anything, but he's writing a Star Wars movie. And he went out on the record to say, hey, listen, this is going to be a Star Wars movie in the sense that it exists in the same universe that the Star Wars franchise you know and love exists in. But it is not related to anyone you know, to any character you know, to any planet you know. I don't want to touch anything. We've built a universe. Let's explore that universe. That, to me, is exciting. Because at least you know that and you know, you've seen the quality of his work. He's an excellent writer. He's an excellent comedian. So I think that he's got great chops to do something like this.
Is this happening or it's not happening?
No, it is happening. From what I understand.
When is it coming out?
I have no idea. I think he's still writing it, but my understanding is that Taika Waititi has been given the keys to write his or start his own franchise.
Wow. That's big though, huh?
And that's exciting. That's exciting because really the last 30 years, everything we've seen Star Wars related somehow touches upon the Skywalkers. And you know, the Skywalkers are one family.
Would you be interested if there was a prequel about Anakin's parents?
No, not really.
So that's where it ends, right? It starts at Anakin. It ends in Luke and Leia. That's the Skywalker.
Well, in this case, Rey now, but like Rey and Ben, but Ben dies as well. So, yeah, theoretically with Luke, Leia, Ben, and that's it. Yeah. Rey. I don't like the fact that Rey calls herself a Skywalker. That's another other discussion. Yeah, you're right. It ends with Luke and Leia.
Yeah. Should we have that discussion one day? Because I feel like that discussion isn't really relevant because then the movies have just ended. If there was a subsequent movie now and she actively presented herself as Rey Skywalker repeatedly in that movie, I would
throw my popcorn at the screen.
I would have a bad taste in my mouth. But now I have to say, since things have been dormant for so long, it's hard for me to get too worked up about it.
Yeah, the way I look at it is 7 was okay. It was just another retelling. But then 8 and 9, I'm done. I'm out.
You're out? What does that mean?
I'm out in the sense that they're not... took so many liberties with the Star Wars franchise.
If there's another one tomorrow, would you go?
What, on the same storyline?
Yeah.
Like with Rey and John Boyega? And
yes.
No, I don't know. I mean, of course I'd go. Are you crazy? This is the thing, you know. It's kind of like that abusive relationship.
I think the difference is, let's use the Top Gun analogy and the Jurassic Dominion analogy. For Top Gun, we're like, I can't wait for this to come out. Call me as soon as you see it. Let's talk about it. For Jurassic, we're like, I mean, we'll see it because it's big and we got to see it. But
yeah, that excitement certainly wouldn't be there. And, you know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Fool me three times.
This is like, what am I? Exactly. This would be the third, right?
Yeah.
And I'd just be like, what are you doing? This is literally like Stockholm syndrome. It's like you've fallen in love with the hostage takers. You know, you just don't want to get away from them.
That being said, as bleak as things are, the beauty of filmmaking and storytelling is that there is nothing, you know, physically, financially, or otherwise, right, stopping Lucasfilms from coming out with the next installment and it just being gangbusters good.
Yeah, but
nothing stopping them from
theoretically,
this. Creativity,
that's theoretically what we're going to see out of Taika Waititi's work, right? And to be fair, that's kind of like what we're seeing with The Mandalorian. I'm telling you right now, if Jon Favreau decided tomorrow that he wanted to make a 2-hour-long franchise feature film with The Mandalorian, people would be sleeping in front of the cinema months in advance to get tickets. People would be falling over themselves.
How much pull do you think Jon Favreau has? What if he just lost his mind? He just went to an opium den, and the next day he called Lucasfilms and said, look, I want to remake Empire Strikes Back. I want to start it all over again. I want to remake New Hope.
That's the thing, is I don't think he would. You know what's crazy? If you had said, instead of Empire Strikes Back, if you said, I want to remake episodes 8 and 9.
I think he'd get the green light for that, huh?
I don't think, exactly. I think that they would say, look, 1 through 6 are settled. They're kind of like settled law. They're a part of the Constitution. We don't want to touch them now. Episode 7's on shaky grounds. But 8 and 9, if Favreau said, listen, I got drunk and high and I spent a month in Vegas.
I roofied myself.
I wrote 2 new movies, episodes 8 and 9, which I guarantee you will rewrite all the sins of the past, or the perceived sins of the past, and make you $2 billion each. I'm pretty sure that while Kathleen Kennedy would probably have an issue with that, I'm pretty sure Disney's executives would be like, here's a check, go do it.
You know what I would say if I were Disney? I'd say, throw in a new episode 2 and 3 and you got yourself a deal.
Again, so what's interesting, and I was talking to a friend of mine about this, what's interesting is 2 things. One, the older we've gotten, the more I've mellowed towards the prequel trilogy. But what's even more interesting is that those movies kind of weren't made for us. They were made for our kids, or for the next generation. Because if you compare just episodes 1 through 3 to 4, 5, and 6, I'm telling you, all the kids, or now they're younger kids. Now they're older, maybe teenagers, or maybe even early 20s. I'm pretty sure they would say they preferred episodes 1 through 3 to episodes 4, 5, and 6.
That may be true, but I think that's only true because when you watch episode 4, the film quality is not great. That's why.
Yeah, but we were also so young, right? We didn't care. When we watched 4, 5, and 6, when we were in our early teenage years,
visually 1, 2, and 3 are easier to watch. And they're faster paced. I mean, 4 is a slog, especially
dark.
at the beginning. It's a slog.
Dark. It's grimy. Yeah. It looks not good. Everything looks off. The scale models look not great. But having said all of that, even though the visual appeal of 1, 2, and 3 is better, I still think 4, 5, and 6 are superior to 1, 2, and 3.
Oh yeah.
Whereas my godchildren, they think 1, 2, and 3 is superior to 4, 5, and 6.
You still talk to them.
And I bet you
still talk to them if they've got that opinion. You should be.
Of course I do. They're my godchildren.
You'd be like, go back and rethink that. Uncle Pete's not liking that at all.
But yeah, so it's, I think it becomes a question of the age you are when you get first exposed to it.
All right, Pete. I mean, this was an emergency episode that we needed to have. I mean, we got a lot off our respective chests. I still don't. I still don't feel good.
It's well past 1 a.m.
I still don't feel good about Obi-Wan, even though there's some elements that I really, really am appreciative of. I feel like it's just kind of made a mess. But I want to watch it. I want to watch A New Hope again. Maybe I'm gonna put A New Hope on my list, and let's have another watch of that and see how bad the damage is. Maybe I'm overreacting a little bit. Probably I am.
Yeah, maybe.
But again, I think there's some inconsistencies, and those are a little bit frustrating to me.
I'm with you. I'm with you on paper. Look, I really wanted this to be a must subscribe to Disney to watch. And there were times where I was just like, what are we doing here? And it got to there were times where I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm thinking this is a skip. And I think it's settled it's really only because of episodes 5 and 6 that I'm kind of like, okay, this might be, a mooch someone's password.
I mean, if you're not a Star Wars fan, I think it's a skip.
I don't think there's any value add.
If this was just an anonymous sci-fi 6-episode series, I would say this is probably a skip. It's even hard for me to say a skip because I'd still probably watch it, but it's absolutely not something that you need to watch. I think this is only... Yeah,
I would say that this would be like a queue filler for somebody who's got Disney Plus and nothing else left.
I think that's absolutely right.
Which is tantamount to saying it's a skip.
Exactly. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, a subscribe means I've got to see this. I'm willing to pay money for it. Which is like, hey, I kind of want to see that. I've heard it's okay. And a skip is like, well, I don't have Disney Plus. Like, I'm not going to ask my friend for their password. That's embarrassing. Like, I'll live without it. That's a skip.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm with you, but we are Star Wars fans. So for me, it's a mooch. And it saddens me to say that, but them's the breaks.
Those are the breaks. Okay, my friend. Everyone, thank you for joining us on this emergency episode. It started off with a lot of passion. It ended a little bit, not with a whimper, but with resignation. Resignation, it's done. What's done is done. We can't change it.
What's done is done. And Disney, listen, I know you're listening, Iger. I know you're listening, Kathleen Kennedy. You need an independent board member to just kind of, not a fact checker, but you need someone who's there to kind of like just say, hey, let's take a step back. Let's take a pragmatic view on this. Does any of this make sense? And I'm telling you, we'll do it for you. We'll gladly do it.
Oh, first I've got to find that word. I hate it when I cannot think of a word. I'm going to find that word, and that's what we're going to be.
If you can figure out that word before this goes live, I'll make
free hoodie for anyone who can help me.
That's right.
I'm so frustrated. I can't even come up with
Guys,
vocabulary.
We want to hear from you. We really want to hear from you. aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com. Tweet at us at F&S Podcast. Tell us what you think. Do you think we're off our rocker? Do you think we've succumbed to the dark side? Is Obi-Wan the greatest thing since sliced bread? Is this the worst thing to happen to Star Wars since episode 9? Tell us. We want to hear. We want to hear from you. We want to know.
Pete, thank you for your time so late. We appreciate it. Coming to you from London, coming to you from Dubai. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week ahead.
Have a good night, everyone. Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.